This is Marna Weston with Deborah and Laura. We're doing our first stand-up as we walk into the Lake County Courthouse. It's a dreary day, but one with a lot of hope in the fact that a great injustice is going to be undone this morning. As we walk into the Lake County Courthouse, we're coming through the area with news trucks. News 2 of Orlando is just coming in. News 9 is in front of us, as you can see, and News 6 is behind us. So we're News Spot, and we're ready to get the story. Here at the Lake County Courthouse, a bailiff has opened Courtroom 4D and is now inviting members of the family to come inside. This is certainly something that adds to the historic element of what's taking place, that living members of those who were accused, killed, and so heinously misrepresented for many years will now have an opportunity to have history changed here at the Lake County Courthouse. So since we're here, maybe you all can just tell us a second what your expectations are today. First, what do you think, sir?
Well, I think the motion will be granted. It's just, as with so many things, a long time coming. And, you know, part of this, too, if Gilbert King hadn't started all this with his book, nobody probably would have dug a little further. But, you know, having practiced here, I'm not real surprised.
Well, talking about your practice, of course, you were one of the people that has kept the legend of Virgil Hawkins going. How do you think Virgil Hawkins would feel about what's taking place here today?
Oh, he would be here. He would be here. There just isn't any question about it. You know, when Reverend Connolly became the first black mayor of Leesburg, he was there. This was going on. He was alive. He would be there. You know, as with James Sturgeon, too. This would be very historic for both of them, so, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Herman. And Dr. Sherry Dupree, what are your perspectives standing out in front of Courtroom 4D?
I agree with him totally on the things that he said, because this is the truth as to how the family has felt also, that they have had support. And Gilbert King was the one that really got the ball rolling with his book, The Devil in the Grove. Because he came to Ocala and he came to my husband's school, and Herb had him to go through most of the classes to make sure the students were aware of what happened here. And most schools did not get that type of support from the public and from a person. Gilbert stayed there all day. And that was so helpful, and it encouraged them to know what it was like to live in this part of the country with some of the needs that we have. So yes, I am here because it's important that we be here. I've known this man for many, many years. I have worked with Deborah. I have worked with Beverly Robinson. And Beverly is your secretary, I believe, for the organization?
Of our foundation,
of your foundation, yes. So I've been involved for quite some time. And of course with the Hawkins family, recently when they were in Gainesville, you remember? When they did this, gave them the award for their being early pioneers at the University of Florida. So all of these things are so important to helping us to move forward as a people.
Some of the Hawkins family members are here today.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
Could you all just briefly, we've done it, but could you describe what's taking place right here as these people are entering Courtroom 4D?
This is the family members. We will be sitting in one general area, and they have at least 4 units set aside, and we go in as a group. I go in as a group with them with the Shepherd family, the Samuel Shepherd family, because I've been with them for a long time.
Worked with me in trying to get the monument up. He actually had the idea before I did.
Good morning.
This is Mommy Deborah.
Yes.
Nice to meet you.
Good to see you. This is Deborah Hendricks, videographer, and Laura's a student. No, thank you for being here and having us here. We're excited.
I can talk with you all after.
Is it all right if we come in?
I don't know. That's not my fault.
Okay.
I imagine.
Just see?
I think just family right now.
Okay. Hawkins, and also about, you know, the whole story.
Yeah. Well, it does tie into this somewhat because this is 1951 when Shepard was murdered and the other defendant was almost murdered. All of that is right around the time that the other plaintiffs in the suit to desegregate the University of Florida all dropped out. So you take this incident where people were killed, Harry T. Moore getting killed about a month later when his home was bombed, and it scared everybody off except Virgil. And that's why I say he'd be here, because he knew the risks. He didn't need to read Gilbert King's book to know what happened. And in fact, some members of his family were arrested by Willis McCall. And so he had to have the courage to keep going for another 8 years afterwards to get the consent order to desegregate, but it all tied in because this was his community and his family was at risk. He knew everything that was going on.
So now when we talk about Willis McCall and that legacy of judicial terror here in Lake County this many years ago, how do you think that the families are going to feel about finally having this stain taken away?
I know that they find it a long way, a long time coming. It's just the vestiges of Mr. McCall are still not all totally gone. When he died, there were people who actually wrote into the local papers about how good things were when Willis was here, and wouldn't it be great if we had a sheriff like him again? And I imagine there's still people, particularly as you go up to the area where Mr. Shepard was murdered, that still believe the same thing. I don't have to ask because I've driven those roads too many times how many AR-15s are sitting out there, in people's homes. But I mean, that's still a scary area up there.
Allow me to also go back to when we recently met in the last month or so at the University of Florida at the old law school, where the university has finally acknowledged the contributions of its first African-American graduates and students at the University of Florida. You were there. You gave some impassioned words, as well as did the mother of Judge Stephen P. Mickle, the late federal judge. What are your thoughts about that event?
We've been waiting for decades for it to happen. It all ties in, because if anyone thinks that those first students, let alone Mr. Hawkins, didn't fear for their lives in those early days, but somebody had to be there, somebody had to survive to say, you can do it, and they're not going to kill you. But, the stories are not just stories. The first black student, George Stark, was told when he was finishing up his first semester, don't travel on this road, don't travel on that road, and probably one of those roads going back to Orlando was the one through Umatilla, because he said they're a Klan waiting for you to kill you. So, like I say, it all brings itself in, and that's why everybody needed to be recognized. Obviously, Mr. Hawkins risked his life for a decade, but George Allen, George Stark, Stephen Mickle, all had trying experiences just to get to a point that people would say, well, I guess we can't stop them. We'll have to get used to it. Maybe we'll put them on the football team. Who knows? We might start winning some games.
We'll probably just rearrange this for later on, but also if you could just put into context your personal involvement for those who don't know how close you became to Virgil Hawkins and how long you've been involved in keeping his legacy alive. Would you talk a little bit just about yourself and why you do this?
I had the privilege of starting to practice at the same time that he did. The difference was he was 70 years old, he was African American, and he hadn't gone to the law school that I basically walked in without ever giving it a second thought. I never appreciated my degree at the University of Florida till I met the man who was denied it. And so we'd be on the other side of cases, and that's how I got to know him. And that's how I got to see what he wanted to do. And the shame was that we didn't do what we should have done to make the last years of his life, appropriate. So, the University of Florida Law School could have assisted him so that he wouldn't have to struggle as much. It didn't happen. And that's what motivated me afterwards to do something, because it was clear if somebody didn't do something, it's just like this. You had to say these people are basically exonerated. He had to be exonerated, or we would have had the situation that he never would have been recognized.
Well, thank you again, Mr. Herman. And Mr. Herman is known to me because he's actually come to the students in my class in Gainesville and talked to them about this era of history and about the things that people don't know that they should know about. And thank you again, Mr. Herman. Thank you. Here at the Lake County Courthouse as the exoneration of those falsely accused during the Groveland Four time period in history are all down in a different courtroom down in 4D. This is 4B, which is a backup courtroom. We're going to get a chance to go inside and observe with others and actually hear the proceedings on circuit court television.
State's motion is granted to a more particularized motion because it occurred to me that these four men for the last 72 years have been known for the better part of history as the Groveland Four. But really, they're individuals. They had their own names, their own families, friends, brothers, sisters, and lives. We know them as the Groveland Four, but we know them because of the tragedy. We don't know them as individuals. So in preparing the order, I separated out each individual count so that each individual person could be separately identified, separately recognized by the court, and separately have their presumption of innocence restored. So with that, Your Honor, I would ask that the court grant my motion. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Gladson. It was a well-received motion, to say the least, and I thank you and your office for bringing what I feel is a legitimate and legally sufficient motion. As you say, our oaths bind us to follow the law, and I don't think either of us would be here today if there were not a legal basis to do so, and I thank the state attorney for being able to find that. As we near our Thanksgiving holiday, I have to say personally that I'm grateful for my position as the judge who has the unimaginable privilege of being able to grant the state's motion. As Mr. Gladson has eloquently put it, each man should be recognized. The state's motion to dismiss the indictment of Ernest Thomas is hereby granted. The state's motion to dismiss the superseding indictment of Samuel Shepard is hereby granted. The state's motion to set aside the judgment and sentence of Charles Greenlee is hereby granted. Said conviction is hereby vacated. The state's motion to set aside the judgment and sentence of Walter Irvin is hereby granted, and the conviction is hereby vacated. With that, all four gentlemen are fully restored to the innocence afforded them by the law, though denied these many 70 years. I thank everyone for being here, and again to the state attorney for the job that they have done.
And so as we stand outside the courtroom at 9:57, Judge Davis has brought to a conclusion this hearing brought by the state attorney that all of the four men mentioned, no longer being called the Groveland Four, but also called by their individual names, have been exonerated historically, completely, and correctly. We'll now have the opportunity to talk to some of the living relatives as well as locals who have been involved in this practice for some time. We're on our way to the old courthouse in Lake County in order to participate in the press conference. There should be some really exciting opportunities for interviews there. Yeah. As we now prepare to hear more from the state attorney on the Groveland Four, or those previously called the Groveland Four, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Greenlee, Mr. Irving, and Mr. Shepard. now having reclaimed their civil rights, reclaimed their dignity and status, and their families here to observe that. It's an incredibly exciting time. The room is being filled with media, the public, and family members, and we're just waiting for the opening comments.
Thank you.
All right. Well, this is Marna Weston with the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program, and we're talking to Mr. Threat, who is a relative of Mr. Irvin, who was one of the victims in this entire situation, who's now had his civil rights, his reputation reclaimed. His family is here in Thanksgiving in the old Lake County Courthouse as we listen to a ceremony that's going to continue to redeem these citizens so violently and heinously having their lives disrupted. Would you please state your name, sir?
My name's Gerald Threat.
Okay, and Mr. Threat, just describe the situation any way you like in your own words.
Well, first and foremost, I'm the nephew of Walter Irvin, and I'm happy for this day. It's been a long time coming. I am pleased that this day has finally arrived. I'm most happy for those that died, waiting for this day, fighting for this day. I feel as if I am a representative of those individuals, i.e. Walter himself, my grandmother, my mother, my aunt. There is so much that needs to continue to be said in regards to how this entire thing affected us as a family. And hopefully that story too will at some point come out. But today it's Thanksgiving or close to. It's raining outside, so hopefully, we can kind of wash away some of the pain,
Definitely, sir. Can I ask you, how do you feel living here? Do you live here in Lake County?
I live in Orange County.
Orange County. Well, Orange County, Lake County, the Central Florida area has been tied to many of these stories, things that have happened to other people that were recognized in the civil rights era today, like Virgil Hawkins down here, or I think of the gentleman and his wife from over in Mims, Florida, the Moors. How do you think that just this little part of the story is going to help open things up to people?
Well, hopefully it opens it up to the point that we get truth and acceptance. Again, I think one of the key issues here is for us in America is acceptance of everybody, equality. I think we still striving to reach that point, that goal. But again, the American dream, to be loved, to be accepted, to be able to pursue those things that make an individual happy. And that's my hope.
Thank you, Mr. Threat. I appreciate talking with you.
Thank you.
We're moments away from hearing from Bill Gladstone, State Attorney of Lake County.
Good morning.
Good morning.
There's not enough room for my notes with all these microphones. So. We have the order of things this morning. We have several people that are going to speak. After I start, I'll introduce each speaker, and they'll have a couple minutes to, each one's going to represent a family, a couple minutes to speak. And then when we're done, the press will have a chance to ask some questions. I would ask that you hold your questions until we're done. So as we get started, I just want to thank three people that helped make this possible and helped get us here today. The first is Ken Nunley. Ken is an assistant state attorney in our office handling homicide cases. He is brilliant, and he poured over this file with me, and we talked every day. We found things, we looked at things, we examined things, and we came to the conclusion when we started drafting this memo that it was a well-founded motion, and I couldn't have done it without Ken's help. He's also a better writer than I am, so he was able to correct a lot of my grammar. Inspector Keith Riddick, FDLE assigned 2 agents to work on this case, and they did an excellent job. Keith was always there, picking up the phone, whether he was on vacation, traveling between investigations, whatever it might be. Keith always picked up the phone. He knew exactly where to find things. As you might imagine, this file was thousands of pages. So thank you, Inspector Riddick. And finally, Gilbert King. So when FDLE turned over their file to our office, on a thumb drive. There were each different person they spoke to. Each record was broken down into a folder, and there was a folder for Gilbert King. And I realized after speaking with them that they flew up there to New York and they interviewed him and they got his documents. As you know, his work on this case has really brought a lot of attention and helped us get here. Well, I called him because he was listed as a witness in this file. And we started talking pretty regularly. He probably found out pretty quickly that I was pretty needy. And rather than going through these documents each time, I could call upon him with his photographic memory and he could pull something out for me. And that was great because I couldn't have done it without him. In fact, we at one point, when he came down for something else, he and I drove over to Umatilla, and based on old FBI reports and some other data, we figured out, we believe, within pretty close proximity to where Sheriff McCall shot Irvin and Shepard. So we actually, we went there, and then we found the old warehouse where Lake County used to store all the old evidence. So anyway, that was, Gilbert was instrumental in helping us get here. And to all the families that came and supported this morning and at the hearing, I appreciate all your support and your help. And I know we had a lot of phone calls where I explained to you that things didn't look good. I know that was tough. It was tough for you after waiting 72 years to get to this point. It was tough for me having to be the one to explain that to you because, you know, we were in a position where we had no new evidence and there was nothing that we could legally do. But I'm glad we got to where we are because today we sought justice on behalf of Charles Greenlee, Walter Irvin, Ernest Thomas, and Sam Shepard. So that was our goal once we realized we had this new evidence. Follow the evidence, see where it led us, and it led us to this moment now. As I said, for the family, this journey started 72 years ago. For me, while I had known about this case for many years, having been in the Lake County office as a prosecutor, questions would come up, people would regularly call, you know, all kinds of inquiries about the case, do we have a file, those kinds of things. And it was so regular that I became somewhat familiar with the case. But for 72 years, the family's been living this and traveling this journey waiting for today. For me, like I said, it's just July, and it's exhausting having to be in it just for 4 months. I can't imagine how they dealt with it for all those years. When I asked Investigator Riddick to check for that evidence and make sure it was actually missing or gone like we were under the impression, I really didn't have any expectation that he's smiling over there, that he'd find it. But when he called and said, we've got it, then I realized we were onto something meaningful that could give us a legal reason to get where we are today. Because I wanted there to be a legal reason to get here. I didn't want to do it because even though it's, of course, the right thing to do, I didn't want to have to you know, bend rules to get here. So once we found that evidence and it revealed what it revealed, that resulted in the motion that you saw today. So you are not here to hear from me. I think it's best that you hear from the families because their journey has been much more arduous. So with that, I would start by introducing Carol Greenlee, the daughter of Charles Greenlee. Carol, if you'd like to come up.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Attorney. Thank you. And I was told a long time ago, and I'm going to try to hold this together, that God will put people in your space at good times, at the times when you need it. Not when you want it, but when you need it. And today, this is the day that God has made in more ways than one. He has put people in my space that I didn't even have a clue that was on this earth. Inspector Reddy, Gilbert King. Lord have mercy. Lord have mercy. Attorney Gladson, I'm so thankful for you. This man had the courage to do what so many others didn't have, don't have, and Lord have mercy, I hope someday we all will have. The courage to do the right thing. The courage to go beyond what is just right in your face, but to dig deep for those things that you cannot see. You remind me of when my father told my mother, don't bring her back anymore, it's too hard. I was 3 years old. It was in the prison in Starks, Florida. I felt rejected. I felt that I had done something wrong, but I was just a little kid playing in the courtyard in the prison. And all my life, I felt that nobody cared, that I was worth nothing. But I will not let Florida write my story. I will not let Florida decide who I was going to be and what I was going to be. I will not let injustice define me. I will not go to prison. I will not be violent. I will not hate, but I will love and embrace all of those who did not know at the time that my father was a caring and loving, compassionate person that did not rape anybody. I stand here today and say thank you. Thank you for the courage to do the right thing. Thank you for the knowledge of digging deep and beyond what is right in front of you. Thanks, Mr. Reddick, for digging deep. And thanks, Giver King, for the words on paper that will never go away, that will always be there. And thank my family, my extended family, the Irvins, the Shepherd, the Thomas, y'all my family. We got a bond that will never break. And Senator Thompson, you'll always be a senator for me. Representative Morse, you will always be my representative. And Lord knows, Chris Hand, these are people that I didn't know years ago, but now are my family and in my life, and I want to thank you. These are people with courage to do the right thing, to stand up for what's right, and will not take no for an answer. We need that for everybody. We need that. We need you. If you know something that's right, stand up for it. Be persistent. And stand flat-footed on God's promises. Because when you give him something, don't go back and take it away. Let him work his plan. I don't care if it takes 72 years. It might take 80 years. But when God gives you the okay, he did it for me, and he'll do it for you. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Next, I would like to introduce Beverly Robinson. She's the cousin of Sam Shepard.
Hello, everyone. I don't ever like following Carol. She is so emotional, as all of us are about this. But I tell you, this is a glory hallelujah day. I'm a staunch missionary Baptist, and when things get heated in the church, the pastor say people don't even know when to shout. I wanted to shout in the courtroom, but I didn't know if I was allowed. And I didn't want the bailiff to take me out. Oh, Lord have mercy. I just want to say that we all know that there have been many accounts written of this story. the two exceptional books by Mr. King and Mr. Corsair. But today, God lifted up a man. And you know the Bible says, just open your mouth and I'll speak through you and for you. And he did that today. He did it. And State Attorney Gladson wrote the final chapter of your book. He wrote the final chapter of Mr. Corsair's book. It's a phenomenal final chapter. But the last page of the chapter is the one I like the most. It has only 2 words on it. The end. The end. Decades of suffering. And I think State Attorney Gladson made it clear this morning in my paraphrasing of what happened. Why write laws if they're not for everyone? I think he clearly pointed out that it is a new dawn in the 5th Judicial Circuit of Florida under his leadership. And I hope his prosecutors and the attorneys in the area heard him clearly, because I certainly did. I'm a former resident of this 5th Judicial Circuit. And I can say, just by looking on, it has certainly changed. We watched as he stood on the shoulders of, I always say, Chief Justice Marshall, because he came here and didn't finish what you finished today. We thank you for finishing, as Carol has said, a job that some did not have the courage to finish. And it takes courage on the civil rights march. It takes courage. This is not a job, this is not a journey for cowards. And if you're a coward, you better find you some soldiers who can back you up and who are brave. And I too, Carol, had a lot of soldiers, people who supported me. I live in Georgia. But it didn't matter how I journeyed here. I started Friday, car wouldn't crank, got in my daily putt-putt, and it said, I'll do the job. And it brought me here. But if it hadn't, I got a truck too, Mr. King. I would have got in it. But I was going to be here. But I thank you, Officer Investigator Riddick. Thorough he was, and turned up every stone and brought this case together. And of course, you know I thank you. Chris Hand had nothing to do with this family, but he was absolutely wonderful in keeping me informed and giving me the opportunity to pass the information on to my family. I thank you so much, Attorney Hand. Senator Thompson, I'm like you. She will always be Senator Thompson. In 2004, embraced me and said, let's do it. She didn't ask me a question. She simply said, tell me what needs to be done. Went in her pocket, bought books, one of your books, for every legislator, for them to read it. And I'm eternally grateful to her. Sam, like the others, yes, let's give her a hand. Sam, like the others, didn't have an opportunity to have a family, but his nieces are here. Our other cousins are here. We're his family. And I will tell you, I lived this story since I was 5 years old, when their grandmother used to come to my mother's home. They were more like sisters than sister-in-laws. But all I will remember them saying is, they killed Charlie's son. Or she would say, they killed my son for no reason. And my inquisitive mind as a child wanted to know, who are the they? And I sat on a journey and said, if I ever get old enough, I'm going to find out who's the they. And that's how I got involved in this, the they. And other older people said it's too hurtful to talk about it, and they never would. But we're grateful for everything that has happened. This is a wonderful day for this family. I ask God's speed upon the Padgett family. We'll never talk to hate. We'll never talk to hate. From this point on, it's between she and our Almighty to decide what she chooses to take to her grave. and what she chooses to reckon with. But we don't have anything to do with that. It's between she and whomever your higher being may be. To God be the glory. Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. Next, I'd like to introduce Eddie Irvin, Walter Irvin's nephew.
Good evening, everybody. And I want to thank the investigator and Mr. King, and I'd like to thank Mr. King and the investigator for FDLE and the State Attorney, Mr. Gladson, and Senator Thompson, Senator Bobby DuBose, and I think there's another senator down there in Fort Lauderdale. I want to say Kevin or something. I went down there, he was down there. But I'd like to thank everybody that had something to do with this area. I didn't want to get up here and speak. I didn't know how emotional I was going to be. But I want to say something first. My dad, Walter Irvin, brother, is back there in the back. I want to recognize him. And that's my father. As children, we grew up, we wasn't sheltered from it. They told us. And always was taught not to get in trouble. I was listening to Beverly, and Carol, how we all came up. I think the Groveland Four made us better people. I can tell you myself, when two of them became teachers, and the rest of them came up in law enforcement. I had a brother, a cousin in Orange. They all worked for Lake County Sheriff's Office, and a nephew. I refused to. Because of what had happened, I went to work for the state, and I retired there. But because of what happened in our life, it's made us better people. And I felt like God put me in the right spot at the right time to make sure that people wasn't being mistreated. And as Carol has said, we're all a family. The Greenlee family, the Shepherd family, the Thomas family. When I look at everybody, we just family. I love each and every one of y'all. I'm glad to have the support from the families. I'm glad to have the media here to make people aware of this here. And I can feel proud about Lake County. You know, this is my home. This is where I grew up at. And the county commissioner, I see some of them back there in the back. And I met some of them a long time ago. And I'm thanking y'all for what y'all have done for the family. I'm thanking the city of Groveland, mascot, for all y'all support that y'all gave us over the years. We thank you. I love y'all, and God bless you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Gerald Threat, Walter Irvin's another nephew.
Wow. It's been a long time coming. Much has been said already in regards to how long it's been. I want to thank everyone concerned. I want to thank everyone concerned with making this day possible. I'm here as a representative of those that died waiting on this day. I would like to recognize them. They are the reason that I stand before you today. They wouldn't give up the fight. My grandmother, my mother, my aunt, my uncles, and I'm sure the rest of the families have those that have passed on. They left you with this legacy, left you with this task to see it through. And I'm thankful to have this opportunity to stand before you today and say, it is over. But this is just one chapter, this over. Families, we still got work to do. We still got to heal. We speak about how long it's been. I'm 64 years old. I too remember going to the prison, playing in the courtyard. My grandmother asking my uncle, did you do it? No, Mom. No, Mom. So we all have something to take forward, and we all have some healing that is yet to happen. Lake County, the state of Florida, I thank you all for what you've done. Again, not much to say. I'm just thankful. This is Thanksgiving, by the way, or close to it. It's raining outside. Maybe we can wash away a little bit of the pain and, you know, around the Thanksgiving table this Thanksgiving, we can have an entirely different atmosphere without this hanging over our head. For 64 years, this thing has been riding my shoulders. Thank you for coming out today. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have Aaron Newsom, Ernest Thomas' nephew.
Okay. Well, a day of Thanksgiving, it's well said, because it is. Trying to think about my grandmother and my mom and my dad, and how overjoyed they would be. I look at the rain that came in as everything started, and I'm wondering if it was rain, if it was the tears that were coming from heaven. Of overjoyed, this is just something that was unbelievable. When I first heard about this, I kind of came in late. I really didn't know anything because my parents and my grandmother never talked about it. They would say little things to me and to my brother and my sister, and we didn't understand. Living in New York, everybody was together. We didn't even think about white and black. But my grandmother would always give me little hints, and I would think, what's wrong with you? Why are you talking this way? Now I know. Now I know. I thank God for my grandmother, for my grandfather, for my mom and my dad. They gave me a lot of knowledge that I didn't even realize I was getting at the time, but they did it. I want to thank God first for this day and this opportunity. And I was always taught to make sure you thank the people that are responsible to help get things done. Gary Corsier is not here, and I thank him. I want to thank this young man right here. Your books told a story. They opened a lot of eyes. Courage was mentioned earlier. Young man, a lot of courage. Said I wasn't going to do that. Sometimes what comes up just comes out.
It's all right. It's all right.
We are blessed. I hope that this is a start. Because there's a lot of people that didn't get this opportunity. A lot of families did not get this opportunity. Maybe they will. Maybe this is the start of something good. I hope so. This country needs to come together. We need courage. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to introduce Gilbert King.
Thank you. You know, we're standing in this building today, which has a significant importance, because upstairs there was a courtroom that 72 years ago, the abomination of justice that took place in this building was so severe that the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the verdicts in this case, threw it right out. We're here in this building because there was supposed to be a retrial, and Sheriff Willis McCall transported two of the defendants, Samuel Shepard and Walter Irvin, back to this building for what was supposed to be a retrial, except they never made it. Sheriff Willis McCall shot them, killing Sam Shepard on the side of a road not too far from here, and critically injuring Walter Irvin. Thought about this. If Walter Irvin was to die on the side of that road, just a few miles from here, we never would have heard his story. And we probably never would have heard this entire case. It would have died in the dark. But Walter Irvin was a fighter. He was fighting for everybody. And he hung on enough to tell his story that inspired an FBI investigation and a lawyer from New York named Thurgood Marshall, who came down and began to represent the Groveland Four. So many people involved in this effort. You've heard of that spoken about today. Everybody just sort of landed on the backs of the families who had this unshakable belief that their relatives deserved to have their innocence restored. But I do want to talk about one of those people. We've heard him mentioned here today. State Attorney Bill Gladson did a complete investigation. He could have easily kicked this case down the road and let somebody else deal with it, but that's not what he did. Even when it got frustrating and he felt that there was no path towards this day, he dug in harder. And the result is he wrote one of the most powerful motions I've ever read. And as somebody who combs through civil rights documents, that deserves to be acknowledged. It's a brilliant piece of writing and a brilliant motion. And you can tell the way it was written, the language was unequivocal and the language was necessary, because State Attorney Gladson understands that the credibility and the integrity of the entire criminal justice system depends on accountability, and it depends on recognizing injustices from the past and moving forward on them, as was done today. Speaking about this bridge to the past, I just have to mention this because Thurgood Marshall was really the first line of defense down here when this case began. He summoned his lawyers and built up a defense. And his entire life was about equal justice under law and the pursuit of this and fighting. It was dangerous for him to come down and take on cases like this. He was irreplaceable to the civil rights movement. And yet his colleagues warned him, don't go, we can't afford to lose you. You know, we have these cases, these landmark civil rights cases in the pipeline. You're irreplaceable to this movement. And Marshall said, these cases matter. These cases save lives. And I just want to take this opportunity to introduce to you a friend of mine, Thurgood Marshall Jr., who's come down from Washington, D.C. to be here with the families. And I have a question for him. Come up here, sir. I just have a question for Mr. Marshall. What would something like this mean to your father today, who spent his whole life working for equal justice under law?
Thank you, Gilbert, and good morning, everyone, on this glorious, glorious day. As those of you who read Gilbert's book know, the stories, my father was a storyteller, and a hallmark of those stories was his heroes. You know, that was his clients. And so for me to be in the presence of the Greenlee, Irvin, Shepard, and Thomas families, I am in the presence of his heroes, and so that is very moving to me, and to be able to be a part of this historic day and this moment is very important. But as Gilbert and others have mentioned this morning, there are so many people, countless people that we need to remember who suffered similar injustice and similar fates, whose names and faces have been lost to history. And so I think Gilbert would agree that perhaps more than any other case my father worked on, this one haunted him for many, many years. But he believed that our better days were ahead, and he may not have envisioned the leadership and the heroism of people like Mr. DuBose and Ms. Thompson, and certainly the hard work and dedication of these two gentlemen and their teams. But I just wanted to take a moment. Gilbert asked me a question, and I'm going to use it to just pay tribute to these two great individuals, Mr. Gladson and Mr. King, who are true American heroes, crusaders for equality and crusaders for justice. And it is an honor for me to be able to be in the presence of these heroes and these heroes.
So with that, I would open the floor to questions. We've got a few minutes.
Attorney Gladson, a question either for you or Inspector Riddick. You talked about the critical need to find that additional evidence that was lost for all these years. Could I ask maybe Inspector Riddick to describe how that was ultimately found, where it was found, and why it was lost for so long? Or
Sure, and I can also answer to some extent that question. Come on up, Keith. We learned that the evidence was in Marion County until 1999. So the first trial was here, the second trial was in Marion County, and I suspect, and we had talked about this, that people over the years had looked for the evidence in Lake County, but it had been in Marion County until 1999, when it got transferred back to Lake County. You have anything you want to add to that?
Just that, 72 years of paperwork, and it's not like this case was in a computer somewhere. So we were, say, fortunate enough to contact the clerk's office here, the lady in charge of the evidence, Terry Schaefer, and she says, I'm pretty sure I've got that. And from there, it was all uphill.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and so it was found here in Lake County, as opposed
Yes, correct. Yes, sir.
State Attorney, recognizing all the families and their grief and happiness of what's gone on here, how can other citizens of Florida, if they know of heinous misrepresentations of justice during that era, how can they get in touch with your office if it happened here in order to make sure the same type of justice can be found for other families?
So if it happened here, the prosecutors that you see here today, they live in this county, they work in this county, they're here every day. We are in the community. We have a very strong presence. We're easy to reach. They can certainly call our office. This case was, the fact that the evidence still existed made it somewhat unique. I don't know that you're going to find that very often, particularly with this set of circumstances that got us here. But certainly if they have questions, they can call our office. Anybody? Any other questions? All right, seeing no hands.
I have a question. Do you have a unit that looks at misconduct?
I'm sorry, I can't hear
Do
you.
you have a unit that looks at misconduct cases?
We have a case integrity review unit that looks at allegations of misconduct that come to our office for review. We've had it for probably 6 years.
Thank you.
All right. No other questions. I think that concludes the event. Thank you very much.
This is Attorney Bill Gladson. Gladson, 5th Judicial Circuit in Lake County, who is, and his team have overseen making sure this historic injustice has been overturned. The families are extremely excited. The public's excited. I wanted to ask you about a follow-up to the question before about other injustices that may exist, what your office is doing, and also just give us a little bit of how you're feeling right now about this.
So I'm pleased that the court ruled in our favor. Like the investigators said, once we found the evidence, you know, we were in a position where we could really review this matter from a legal perspective, and it kind of it gave us some fuel and some energy so we could move forward, because as we talked about before, much if not everything we know about this case has been widely known for 70 years, so I didn't expect to find anything new. As it relates to other injustices, you know, we are always available to talk to the citizens in our circuit if they have concerns. You know, like I said, we are in the community. We are part of the community. We work and live here, and we treat it like family. So certainly if someone has questions, they can certainly come see us.
Oh, please, you come in, sir.
Very nice. Thank you.
The impact of a book like Devil in the Grove and these other civil rights issues that have come up have led to a question about what happens when these crimes that occur across boundaries happen in different jurisdictions. Do you have a thought about the best way for citizens of Florida to work to make sure that they can bring these kind of things to the attention of your office and other offices?
So I would just suggest that they start local. If they have concerns, they can speak to their local, you know, sheriff's office, local law enforcement agency, local prosecutor. If there is something that could be done, jurisdictional boundaries aren't going to. That's not going to hinder an investigation. That's not going to get in the way.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I got an uncle.
We're here speaking with Senator Thompson, who has for years been working to introduce legislation to have the same effect as the decision that was made in Judge Davis's court. I'm going to ask her, please, to have a few comments on the situation.
Well, this has been a long journey, and we did what we were able to do through the legislative process. I introduced bills to exonerate the Groveland Four. Those did not pass. We did get an apology from the legislature, unanimously passed the House and the Senate to apologize for the racial injustice that occurred with regard to the Groveland Four. And then the very first meeting of the cabinet in 2019, the cabinet voted to pardon the Groveland Four. And I continue to say that a pardon is what you give someone who is guilty, and these men were not guilty, and what was called for was exoneration. Let's clear their records. And so I met with Commissioner Nikki Freed and with FDLE about the investigation and pushing forward for exoneration, and FDLE had the task to start an investigation, and you heard the Attorney Gladson talk about that investigation today, and here we are. It's a heartwarming day. I'm very hopeful that it's the beginning of reckoning with a lot of our history that has been ignored and swept under the rug.
Thank you, Senator. May I follow up with you on another historic sense of Florida injustice? The case of the Moors over in Mims. I know when previous governors have been in office, some of them have looked into it. It's been a long time. But do you see that that's something else that the legislature and also citizens like yourself now can help push forward to find answers in those murders and unsolved cases as well?
Well, we're beginning to understand how important Florida's history is with regard to the civil rights movement. And people often think of Medgar Evers in Mississippi, which was 1954. They think of Rosa Parks, which was 1955, and have forgotten or never knew that the first martyrs in the civil rights movement were Floridians, Harry T. Moore and his wife Harriet, whose homes were bombed in 1951. Well before Medgar Evers or before Rosa Parks. And so we have got to elevate this history, and that's something that I'm working on.
What do you think it is about Florida that it leaves us to think more about Disney World and tourists and vacations, that this important history, and what can we do as a citizenry to bring it more to the fore?
we have an opportunity now for historical museums that focus on African American history to get some funding through the American Rescue Plan, and hopefully more of these kind of efforts will be highlighted, and we will begin to claim our rightful place in the whole, history of the civil rights movement.
Is there any other thought that you'd like to leave us with? Thank you for the time to speak with us, and I'd just like to give you the opportunity to close in any way you'd like.
I've been working on a project called Sankofa, which is an African term that means go back and fetch it. And you might have seen the symbol of Sankofa, which is a bird that flies forward, but its head is turned backward, to say that it's important to go back and unearth some of the history that has been swept under the rug, that has been buried, so that young people in our schools, in the curriculum, will know where Florida's place is with regard to civil rights.
Thank you, Senator. Appreciate your time. And happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Mr. Marshall, I'm Marna Western from the University of Florida, the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program.
Oh,
love to have a chance to speak.
Appreciate your question.
Thank you. This is Deborah Hendricks, our videographer, and Laura's students come along with us.
Oh.
Just wanted to know if you could give us just a couple of seconds, your thoughts on what has happened here, and also any reflections you might have that you think might rest upon how your father might have thought about things, or just the whole occasion.
Well, I appreciate your interest in asking me, and it's just been an honor for me to be here, especially during a period with such inequality, incivility, and division in American society, to be able to come together for an event that corrects those kinds of injustices. And it's long overdue, but it's an outcome we've all hoped for decades. And it's very moving for me to be able to meet families of these 4 individuals who suffered this injustice, and also to be able to see the hard work of Bill Gladson, who put this together with his team in an effort that was pretty Herculean in many ways. And of course, Gilbert King, who's just done a remarkable job with his skills of research and writing and persuasion to help bring this to the public and to, in many ways, this wonderful conclusion.
So many people think of civil rights, they think of Martin Luther King, they think of Rosa Parks, and they think of Malcolm X. But the outstanding work that was done by your father and Charles Hamilton Houston and other attorneys in the past actually did things like dealing with the segregation of graduate school programs. What kind of perspective, when you were growing up with your dad, did he talk about his work, or could you illuminate for us anything about how he might have gone through any of these cases and the ideas that they had?
That's a fascinating question, and I will finish by explaining why. But one of the most important things my father as a storyteller brought to all of his storytelling was that the people who mattered to him, who were his heroes, were the families who took care of him and kept him safe, and his colleagues, and his clients who risked their lives, their livelihoods. And so to be able to be engaged and in connection with descendants of these very individuals is very meaningful. But what's also meaningful is the second part of your question, which I promised I'd finish with, and now has slipped my mind.
Well, we were talking about people like Charles Hamilton Houston, who worked with and inspired your father, Constance Baker Motley. These individuals and his relationship with them, how did they shape the work that he did, especially going back and dealing with things like graduate schools?
Well, yes, thank you. So many of the accomplishments in the movement were due to all of the leaders in the various aspects of the movement. And, of course, the foot soldiers, the hard workers, protesters, supporters, donors, it all had to come together in a way that is something that we fiercely need now. And one of the things, though, and what I promised to get to in conclusion to the response, is that of the many cases my father talked to us about in the house, this one haunted him so much he didn't speak of it. So disturbed by the level of injustice.
If I conclude with one more thought. You mentioned your father being safe when he traveled. A lot of people now are familiar with the Green Book as a movie, and the whole idea that it was very difficult for African Americans just in general as tourists to travel along, but a person of the notoriety of your dad, to be able to travel and be in different places and seek justice, he also had to have a place to sleep, places to eat. What type of connections did he make, either in this area or just around, in order to make it possible that he could pursue justice in that manner, being an African-American man himself during those time periods?
Yes, indeed. When we talk about soldiers in foxholes developing a special bond, that is the precise reason why his clients and the people who supported his work on the road were his heroes, because he always said he had the luxury of moving on to the next case. And people who helped him in many, many instances, one instance of unfairness and violence is unspeakable, but in many, many instances paid terrible prices for helping him.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to speak with you, sir.
Appreciate it.
Do you have a card with you?
I appreciate your question
thank you.
in the press conference, because there's so many.
Pardon me. I think they want to. Please feel free to get in, Senator. We're just going to take a picture.
How are you?
Senator. Sorry. Here we go.
And it's time for social justice to speak up and be known, and it hasn't been known. So I thank the good Lord for what's going on today. And justice has been served. 72 years, and I've been with this family for quite a while, so I've seen them ups and downs. I've been with them in Montgomery, Alabama, and EGI and other places, and I've seen the ups and downs and the struggles that they've had to go through. And I've been there also when King was there, the fellow that wrote the book. So it's time. It is time. And I'm very thankful. But more to come. That's why we've got so much chaos right now, because we're coming out of the shadows into the light, and that's what's important.
How do you think efforts like this can help focus on Rosewood and finding out historically who the people were responsible for the atrocities that took place there?
Well, the atrocities in Rosewood, they said there was nobody. After all of that, they had the trial in February in Bronson, and nothing happened. But most of those people, yes, they are dead, but yet their great-grandsons and great-granddaughters are yet living. And we have had some openings already. One fellow, I'm going to see him, he is in Florida, and he wants to talk about his family heritage. And he says that he will share that type of history. So I'm looking forward to that. Plus, we're looking for the grave sites down there. Then there's money that has been put aside to help find grave sites. So that's another positive. So we're moving forward, and hopefully things will move forward and get more of these stories out. And EGI is doing a wonderful job in helping to get that out. But I work with the UNESCO Transatlantic Slave Trade, and we're right there in the mix of all of that. And so Georgia and Florida and these states, we're really working hard to make sure the word is out to the public. So I thank you.
How does UNESCO's effort in looking for these historic heritage sites enrich the knowledge of the people that live in Alachua County?
Well, it's going to help them already. It has helped them because it has brought out many of the plantation histories that has not been known before. When you're calling them a farm or you're calling them some other names, we're getting the true history. We're going into the records. And we've gotten records from the Daughters of the Confederacy, and they don't talk. And that's where the records are kept. And once we can get some more of those type records, then we can clear more people and talk about more situations that have happened. So yes, we're moving forward. It's a slow go, but we're moving.
One final question, please, Dr. Dupree. Standing here in this historic venue, the old Lake County Courthouse, and as was mentioned by some, that it was upstairs that these injustices were perpetrated. How do you feel today, yourself personally, and for the families, in that this stain of injustice has been swept away today?
Well, it has been swept away in a way, but they still got a lot to live with. Because they've had so many struggles and fights. They've lost land. They've had to move from this area, a lot of them north. So yes, the struggle is still on. But this is one step toward justice. There are many more steps that have to be moved to. Education is one of the key things, and once we educate people with what happened today and others, we will see some change.
Thank you very much. Representative Bobby DuBose, Florida Gators here.
Go Gators.
And a gentleman who not only now but also in college represented the same type of understanding of significant issues. Can you kind of wrap up for us what this occasion means?
Oh man, I think it's one of those things that kind of takes the present and the past and kind of bringing them together. And what I mean by that is because personally, I'm raising 4 young black men in America. So whenever I think of the Groveland Four story, I think about my sons. I think about some of the current day issues and their experiences of injustice that they see on the regular, and then we go back 72 years. It's an indication of how far we've come, but how far we have to go. I always say I was honored and privileged to be allowed to carry the legislation in 2017 that brought about the apology from the state. I just remember that day on the floor, it was unanimous. It just kind of brought chills to me. And again, I'm coming from a very personal place with my own 4, but it also speaks to a bigger issue, right? It's awesome what we did here today, but there's so many, I think it was stated earlier too by Thurgood Marshall Jr., there's so many other Groveland Four families, descendants, not only in the state, but throughout this country. And so we are still dealing with how we deal with black men. In current day, we've seen some very modern examples of incidents that have led to young black men losing their lives just because of the color of their skin. So it's a mixed bag for me. I'm really excited. I'm really happy for the descendants, especially Carol. Just really got to know her and her story, and we saw her emotion, and that's so genuine. It speaks to what she's been carrying. So I'm excited about that, hopeful, but also the reality of the time that we live in. And I'm still fearful of my boys. I still have the conversation with them. So mixed emotions is the best way I can kind of sum it up. Excitement, but still concern. Possibility, but understand the reality.
From your role in the Florida House, what message could you give to the people of Florida and to the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program about how the legislature and how our government addresses these types of issues, and your own personal perspective, and then that would conclude the interview?
Yeah, I think what we can walk away from this from, legislative perspective is that these injustices require all of us. As we've seen, there's been a journey. There's a role that we played in the Florida legislature to help get us to this point. We saw just community activists. We've seen one of the individuals who participated and played a role is a young man, Ben Polsky, lives in my district, and he wrote a children's book, a children's version of the Groveland Four, and expanded, and he wrote postcards. And so, when you just think about the people that engage, so I think the message is that this signified when we as the state of Florida is at our best, and when we just had government, we had not-for-profit, business community, activists, regular, just the core of the state come together. And to reach this day, we could not have done it with all of the parts. So it's hopeful. And the thing about it was cross aisles. It was Republicans, it was Democrats, white, black, young, old. Again, it was the core essence of the goodness of the state. And so we're hopeful, and we can take this model, I think, and continue to correct some wrongs and bring some justice to some folks, some descendants that are still in pain because of what we did, the injustice as a state.
Representative Bobby DuBose, Florida Gator, thank you very much. Appreciate the interview.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Go get it.